Good morning, and welcome to readers of AU Manufacturing News and members of the Australian Manufacturing Forum LinkedIn group. I'm Peter Roberts, and I'm your host today for our latest webinar on how Australian manufacturers are reinventing themselves in the modern times. Our latest webinar is brought to you with the support of Fusion5. Fusion5 provides business solutions and services that support you and your business in turning potential into reality. Working today with global technology leaders such as Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, and Workday, Fusion5 partnered with Australian manufacturers of all sizes. They work to increase operational efficiency, create people-centric cultures, strengthen customer relationships, and plan better for the future. By modernizing and optimizing the tools, systems, and processes your company uses, Fusion5 delivers outcomes that generally improve your business. We're joined today by two executives from Fusion5 who work with manufacturers every day, as well as 3 Australian manufacturing CEOs who've all been through processes of reinvention. We're going to find out why and how manufacturers are evolving to stay ahead of rapid and sometimes disruptive change. But first, let me introduce our panelists. Joining us today from Fusion5 are Michael Llewellyn and Craig Potter. Every day, both men talk with and help manufacturers implement enterprise software solutions. So they see reinvention every day of the week. Michael Llewellyn is Fusion5 Industry Director Operations, and he'll take part in the panel discussion. Craig Potter is Solution Architect of Fusion5, and he'll sum up today's discussion after the event, so stay tuned for that. The first of our 3 manufacturer leaders is Ross George, Managing Director of AUSTENG. AUSTENG is a family business, and Ross's grandfather worked for companies such as International Harvester, Ford, and Alcoa. Now they make special purpose machines. AUSTENG has been through numerous reinventions over time. Next is Dario Valenza, founder of long-distance drone surveying company Carbonix. Dario began his career in composites, building Australia's America's Cup Challenger yachts. Now he makes high-performance remotely piloted aircraft, otherwise known as drones. Finally, we'll hear from Barry Quinn, Engineering Director and Partner of automotive manufacturer Premcar. Premcar was well known in the past as Tickford Special Vehicles, making special vehicles for Ford. Today, the company still engineers and produces vehicles such as the Nissan Warrior 4-wheel drive, just released. I'd first like to turn to Michael Llewellyn, though, of Fusion5. Michael, you've seen the inner workings of many Australian manufacturers undergoing change. How would you define a pivot or a reinvention?
Thanks, Peter. I suppose there's many descriptions of this, and if anybody goes out and searches across the web, manufacturing pivot, give me a definition, you'll find many different ones. But I kind of summarize this being a process of changing the direction of a business and the current strategy of a business when it's not delivering the desired results. It involves strategically changing the business model, the product, or the target market, and there's a number of key pivot areas that we'll touch on later, Peter. Excuse me, when we talk about some specific industries. But a quick example of that would be, something that was happening in COVID because of massive demand for sanitization products, and we had these distilling companies that were all flipping across and start making hand sanitizer overnight. So that's a perfect example of a pivot, and I think there's some I suppose overlap in historical definitions here as well about integration of supply chains, be those horizontal, or in this instance typically the pivots tend to be vertical, Peter.
Do companies always know when they have to pivot?
And I suppose it's a strategic analysis of what they're doing. They'll see either some slowdown in their business, that what we're doing today isn't working, and that's reflected in operational financial results. And some of that might well be from insights and maybe data analysis into what's happening downstream that they can tap into to expand into growth. And some of the examples that I'll talk about later, Peter, as we refer back to this stuff around some of the technology solutions that may be available today that weren't historically.
Michael, what role does enterprise software have to play in company reinvention?
Look, ERP systems typically form the core of a business, and what you'd be looking at doing in terms of managing that is have enough flexibility across modules. So if I wanted to go into manufacturing and I was previously just distributing, which we have with some of our clients, that the base software would allow you to expand to do that. You would also want some level of scalability to say that, you know, we can operate in a particular region, we can run multiple manufacturing facilities, it can be centralized, it could be, you know, run as a lot of people are doing now as cloud or as a SaaS solution as well.
Thanks, Michael. No industry's been through more wrenching recent change than the automotive sector. Barry Quinn and Premcar have been in the thick of it. Barry, could you tell us a little bit about Premcar's beginnings and evolution from its early days working with the likes of Ford?
Sure thing. As long as you start calling me Bernie, Peter, I'm happy to tell.
I'm sorry.
I was waiting for a Bernie.
Yeah, so our business has come a long way. My personal story is that I was an employee of Tickford and ProDrive back in the day, and really my career was really developed through the development of vehicles for Ford under both the Tickford brand and the Ford Performance Vehicles brand. So I'm a car enthusiast. I've always loved high performance cars, and I was lucky enough to work through the company in that fantastic period of 2002 through to 2012, where we developed some of the really iconic sports sedans and SUVs, mostly under the Ford brand, but also under the Toyota brand, the Mazda brand as well. So we really grew up and developed this company via those projects for local manufacturers predominantly. So at that time, the Australian car industry, the manufacturing industry was thriving. Ford at the time was building around 100,000 vehicles per year out of its plant in Broadmeadows. It was a very different industry to what it is today. And our business was all about developing niche products and doing niche engineering on those high volume products. So Ford, with their factory running at 100,000 vehicles per year, were maxed out in terms of capacity, and they couldn't handle anything that was niche. So anything that was niche came across to us for both engineering and secondary manufacturing. And that includes things like LPG conversion, sunroof installation, specific models for a sports feel to the car or luxury feel. And it was a very, very successful business. It was about facilitating the development of niche vehicles to fill spots in the market so that revenues were maximized for that company. So the big change for us was, you know, the close down of local manufacturing of vehicles in Australia. That was the big step change. It started in around 2012, and I think the last of the Australian cars were made in 2019 out of Adelaide. So, but it was really a linear fall from 2010-ish down to 2019 when the doors were finally closed on the Holden factory. So we really had to adapt our business. One thing that didn't change though was the consumer preference for special vehicles that are very specific to Australian taste. I'm not saying that the tastes haven't changed. They've obviously migrated from large sedans to SUVs and dual cab pickups, but the need or want for vehicles with an Australian feel, specifically modified and designed and validated for Australian customers, has not gone away. Yep, and that's where we filled that niche now, and we're now working on dual cab pickups and SUVs for Nissan and a lot of other manufacturers here as well, recognising the Australian customer as a particular kind of customer, even though their tastes change.
Bernie, and that's your name, I'm sorry about that before. It's a very different kind of company today to the one before. It was a British company owned before. You're now you're at MBO. What difference has that made?
Well, it's huge in terms of my personal circumstances, because, you know, the ownership of the company, which myself and Jim, my business colleague, partner, we took over in 2012. We did an MBO of the business, management buyout, for those that don't know what that means. You know, the pressures that come with that are huge, but so do the rewards if you do it properly. But or if you're lucky enough to be in the circumstances where you can do it properly. But you know, the important thing for us is we still recognise that the change is ongoing. There's not a day. Everyone, it's a common thing is people come back to me and say, "Oh, it must be so good. You're successful in your business, and you know, you must step back and feel good about that." And I go, I don't feel that. I feel like there's very little chance to reflect and feel like everything's stable, because the industry is changing more now than it ever did. So our need to adapt to those changes is even more relevant now than what it was, or pressing now than what it was even in 2012. So the pressure never goes. I mean, anyone who's entering into business now, or looking at owning a company, or taking on a directorship or whatever, if they think that they're going to get to a stable condition where they've reached the peak and now it's all just plain sailing and it's a plateau, it doesn't happen. So just get over that now. Life is all about dealing with the change and accepting the change and thriving in that environment, not about getting there and going, sweet, I can take my foot off the gas.
So you had some warning of the change coming, and in some ways I can see your business is a little bit business as usual, but with new partners or different partners. So did you have to remake your partnerships with the overseas majors?
Oh, 100%. You know, I mean, this is the other thing. Hindsight's always 20/20. So, you know, if I look back on the mistakes that we made in the years 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, you know, we probably would have got to a higher level of revenue and maybe a little bit more comfort, and maybe a few more nights where I didn't wake up in a cold sweat earlier. But the thing is, you have to, you know, it's all about learning. There's no book on how, well, there are books, right? But there's never going to be one on how to run Premcar. And so, given the specific nature of our business, so really, you know, I remember I heard a comment, a quote somewhere, I can't remember where, but entrepreneurialism is more about never giving up and refusing to die, refusing to give up, than anything else. You know, in business, you know, I'm sure that all the panelists here and probably some of the audience have got to the point where they think, uh-oh, I'm dead, you know, too far down the road or very close to. Yep, got to make payroll, got to pay bills. It's an awful feeling, but you know, we've all been there, and that's the reality of doing business, and it does build resilience, and it builds a level of never say die that you need if you're going to be dealing with this change all the time and having to adapt and having to make payroll. Yep.
So Bernie, the changes they were to do with offshoring. Michael Llewellyn, I think you've got an example of a pivot in the opposite direction to do with onshoring. I know you can't name the company, but can you give me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, look, I've been involved with a couple of, I'll call one was a client and one was actually a customer of mine before I was consulting in an industry, where they have onshored critical components, largely to do with pressure vessels and the associated quality and trust and traceability that goes with that, Peter. So those guys, you know, they're significant size companies, and some of them are foreign owned as well, that have made that decision to bring those critical components back into Australia, really for that customer confidence that the quality of the product, given its purpose, is fit for it.
It's the Australian story, isn't it? There are advantages, but we rarely hear about them. Are you seeing much onshoring, Michael?
Well, I've seen, you know, three or four companies doing that over the last, I'm going to say, 5 years.
Right. I'd like to move now to Ross George of AUSTENG. Ross, yours is a very different company. It's a long-term family business, and I believe your grandfather was a manufacturer and his father was an engineer. Can you tell us about your history?
Thank you, Peter. We are a family of engineers. Commercial refrigeration was developed in Geelong, and my great-grandfather was actually involved in rolling out that commercial refrigeration. We've got this wonderful stack of letters when he installed the first commercial refrigeration in South America in the 1890s, sent over on a sailing boat, and the handwritten letters back to his wife, which are fantastic family history. So yeah, my grandfather left the large manufacturing companies in the 50s to make components, and the company's evolved through the generations, and we now design and build. We variously call ourselves design and builders or technology enablers.
Yes, Ross, and of course, the car industry exiting Australia and exiting Geelong was a painful blow for you. How did you react to that?
Oh, yeah, badly. It was really great listening to Bernie. It was fantastic. With the scenario for us was slightly different in that we supplied capital equipment. So the car companies had all these, and tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers all had wonderful engineering problems, safety problems, production problems, quality problems, and so we were a small boutique, you know, and go in and address particular issues. But we were capital equipment suppliers. So as soon as they announced that they were closing, while they had a gradual wind down, capital equipment just stopped straight away. And in fact, in some cases, we actually had orders, and the purchasing department rang up and just said invoices for what it's worth and throw it in the bin. So we lost our business overnight. We didn't lose it gradually. We literally lost it from you know, from one day to the next. So yeah, Mike was talking about signals here. Well, the signals for us were pretty dramatic. You know, it was 90% of our business just disappeared. And we had all the issues. Where do we pay the payroll? Who do we keep? What do we do? How do we, you know, it was a horrible time. And that was 2013.
And you didn't retire then, Ross?
I was too young. So no, we made the decision. So the business is it's a family business in the genuine sense. It's myself and my wife. My wife's background's she's a lawyer, commercial litigation. So we made the decision to retain the business model, retain the model which was engineering solutions, design and build, but just go and find a, you know, inverted commas, just go and find a new market, which is what we did. And when we're now working a lot in the environmental space, so we're developing a whole lot of technologies with a whole lot of customers in alternative fuels, alternative energy, circular economy, which I'm so glad I didn't retire, because the engineering is so interesting. I don't know how Bernie's found it, but we're working on different vehicles. But yeah, I've found that the transition from an engineering point of view is different from a business point of view to be fantastic.
And Ross, you were a client in many ways of the big companies previously, and at their whim, and there was a lot of up and down in the car industry, of course. Now I understand you actually invest in some of the companies that come to you for assistance. And
that was one of the really big changes, and it's a change for the better. I mean, if you're working for large multinational corporations, you know, they go out for tender, you know, they screw you on price, and then you do the job, and you're looking to do it for the minimum cost and meet their specs, and then you send them an invoice, and that's the end of it. I think we've got an investment now in 7 of our customers. The startups, they're all startups by their nature. They're always short of money. So we've, in some cases, put hard money in. In all cases, we've put in kind. So we've got shareholding, and that just completely changed the business model, because you've got an investment in it. You're not trying to do everything down to the last cent, because you know you're going to get the next job. You've got an investment in the company. So it's sort of it turns into more of a marriage. Rather than a really hard-nosed transaction with a multinational company, and I'd have to say it's a much and there's trust involved. So you know, you haven't got all the transactional costs of lack of trust and big contracts and all that sort of stuff you have with large corporates. So you know, if you're working with smaller companies, communications are easier. So, but it's just that they're always bloody desperately short of money.
Ross, the last thing I think to mention that people may not know so much about is Geelong, which is a very special manufacturing environment. It's a small but very capable group of manufacturers down there. And your wife, Lynn, you mentioned the marriage. Lynn was the chair, I believe, of Geelong Manufacturing Council, which is a terrific local regional organisation down in Geelong, and the Chamber of Commerce. So, and she helped you along with a new business, with a new type of business?
Oh, well, look, I'm on record of saying, and I'll say it again, the business would have survived, would not have survived without Lynette, because I was the sort of the engineer going, shit, we've got to make better mousetraps. And Lynette said, no, we've got to go out and tell people we're making mousetraps. We made a good enough mousetrap, but yeah, we just needed to go out there. So we did a huge amount of networking, which as an engineer, I was dead against. It's not, I didn't see it as productive. But yeah, it's going out, making contacts, shaking hands, and being chair of the Geelong Manufacturing, being involved in the Geelong Manufacturing Councils, created those networks, the Chamber of Commerce. We're involved in the university, we're involved in the Geelong Tech School, and that just gets your name out there, and and people know that you're making mousetraps. So, guess what? You then start getting orders for mousetraps.
I know you're making more than mousetraps. You are working with companies, leading edge companies like Carbon Revolution. So that is not entirely the truth, Ross. But that was an interesting, very interesting pivot, and a complex one, perhaps, but one that's understandable. Michael, you had an example of a much simpler pivot, which is merely utilizing better the resources you had in terms of your supply chain capability. Can you talk about that one?
I do, yeah. I've got a number that we've worked with Peter, and there's a few in primary production that I'd like to mention specifically. One an egg producer, so these guys are just letting hens run around in a field and selling eggs as it goes, but typically kind of volatile business and very cyclical. And they again went into secondary and tertiary products, so they were making egg pulps and bagging this stuff and being able to freeze it, bring it out later on, but then extended again into cooked products, quiches, omelettes, the kind of stuff that you get in airplane meals, those kind of products that extended the shelf life of those, the perishable products that they had, reduces waste, the volatility of sales and cash flow and everything that goes into that. So and again, you can talk about, is that vertical integration in old money? Is it a pivot? Pick your terms. And similarly, primary meat production that have moved into the preparation of all of these pre-cooked meals that we see now, barbecue, spare ribs, briskets, pulled pork that you just take out. They've done all the prep work for them, but originally those guys were just selling, butchered products, if you like, to another industry that would be then extending that. So, I think if you look at the holistic solution there of pros and cons of vertical integration, there's kind of scales of economies that you gain if somebody's doing the same thing, but if you were looking at your own individual business, there's an awful lot left on the table to be able to extend into that market. We talked about manufacturers of pressure vessels, and then the other one, which might be close to your heart, Ross, is some specialist industries that have got refrigerative equipment, particularly some of the pharmaceuticals that are down at cryo levels, like minus 270 something down there, is that those guys have actually leased out their excess storage when they've had a business slowdown to other businesses. One of them extended out into sort of a third-party packaging facility as well, and also leveraged their big bulk freight agreements, and then kind of on-sold those and managed the shipping for some of their clients as well.
Ross is one of the oldest buildings. Sorry, Ross is one of the oldest businesses we talk to. If I can, sorry, beg your pardon, Mike. Ross is one of the oldest businesses we want to talk to. Dario, you're one of the newest in very exciting fields, of course, drones, or you began as a boat builder, though. Can you tell us about your early work history?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was involved in yacht racing, and specifically America's Cup yachts in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. And it was just a period when carbon fiber composites were becoming feasible for the sort of large, highly stressed structures involved in a racing yacht. And that's a world where there's a lot of focus on performance. So it's really about when you distill it down, you have a certain budget, and it may be a large budget depending on how well funded the team is, but you have finite time, and you have a very clear goal to build the fastest boat on the day, on race day. So you can't buy more time. You can do more stuff within that time if you have more resources, but it all has to come together, and it's performance focused. And so things like lightweight materials are important, but what's really at the core of it is being able to properly ascertain whether what you're doing is an improvement over what you were doing yesterday. So it's all about effectively testing theories. So you build a boat, you go out, you sail it, you know there's a variable and there's an objective result that you get. Has this new keel, for example, made an improvement or not? So it's really about structuring a program to understand the effect that your changes are having on performance, and how that then translates to how the sailors use the boat, because they're effectively the customers, and how that becomes a race-winning combination. So that's really the preparation that before I sort of went into business with Carbonix, I was exposed to this world of very strict performance-focused testing. And some of the technology that came out of that is in fact what we call aeroelastic coupling, which is being able to design a structure, model how it's going to behave under load, and how that deformed loaded shape affects the aerodynamics, and there's sort of a cycle there, there's a loop. So the idea was to apply that to a commercial application, and again with that understanding that how critical data actually is. And so yeah, applying it to something that flies over long distances is a very logical next step.
So when you went into business, you took a lot of the IP with you from the boat building?
Yes, I was fortunate that there was a team that I was a part of where I was able to actually formally take that IP and commercialize it. Initially, it was very much around, again, that aeroelastic design and carbon fiber composite structures. So the design and manufacturing process, particularly around sort of thin, lightweight composite shells. And that's to do with pre-impregnated carbon fiber, which we can get into, but it's a very specific kind of composites. The vision was always to apply it to something, to a broader market, so things like surveying, which is what we're doing now. And the path to that was interesting because obviously, having just gone into business, having to fund it, the thing I knew how to do was develop race boats. And the first product the business created was actually what we call an A-class catamaran, which is a sort of semi-amateur version of what an America's Cup boat would look like in terms of it's a little 18-foot catamaran that people can go race on the weekend. And we developed that, commercialized it. We went to a few international races. We won a world championship, among other things. That then generated orders that brought income into the business, and that subsidized the initial development of the first airframes. And then the learning curve was, how do you go from an airframe to a fully functioning drone with all the electronics integrated? And then once we tried to take that to market, the various friction around getting permits to operate, what the customer actually needs to do to prepare to onboard drones into their workflow. And pretty quickly it became obvious that the way to get this into the market was to offer it as a service. And so that's where we are now, where we basically allow the data capture by providing the tool and taking away all the friction to make a company adopt it.
So I should say that the drones you produce can fly for 8 hours, and they go very long distances surveying lengthy infrastructure such as pipelines and electricity power systems. You've also gone further than the manufacturing of the composites and the optimizing of the airframe, though. You also produce the avionics and so on. Can you tell us a bit more about the things you produce for the particular drone you make, Dario?
Correct. So the airframe is the basis. Obviously, being able to have a lightweight structure that carries everything means for a given overall weight or a given lift or a given power or fuel load, you can carry more payload further, and that's really what gives us a competitive edge. Then to make that all work, you need a set of avionics, which is basically electronics that do the manipulation of the flight controls and the navigation of the aircraft. Then you need a payload, which again we buy in, but that's usually either a scanning LiDAR combined with an RGB camera or a gimbaled camera that gives a live real-time feed of what the drone is seeing. So there's an integration piece there where we have to make our electronics compatible and work, play happily with the payload. And then there's a whole user interface element where there's a ground control station, where there's a map that's showing what the drone is doing and enables the pilot to supervise it. So bringing all that together was a challenge. I think when I first set out, there was an assumption that you can buy components off the shelf, put them together, and create a system that works. Over time, we found that that was only partially true. And again, it changes over time because the industry is developing. But to get the level of reliability that we wanted in order to obtain, for example, BV loss beyond visual line of sight operations, which has a CASA process behind it, and to be able to guarantee to the customer that the aircraft will work day in and day out in adverse weather, in the field with dust, varying temperatures, all the things that get in the way of electronics, we had to undertake a lot of internal testing, and we set that up in a very rigorous fashion to make sure that whatever goes into the aircraft will behave as we predict and expect. And a lot of it required custom boards, custom connectors, custom software to get it all to play nicely together. Probably worth mentioning that the one complicating factor is when we first started looking at long-range commercial drones, the two biggest factors were range, and we wanted to be up there with what a helicopter does in order to replace helicopters effectively. And the second thing is launch and retrieval. So in order to get range, you need a fixed-wing aircraft as opposed to a multi-rotor or a helicopter. But a fixed-wing aircraft requires airspeed to take off and land, and so you need a runway or a catapult or some way to get the thing into the air and then retrieve it at the other end. So we actually incorporated a VTOL system, a vertical takeoff and landing system, into the aircraft. Again, made possible by the fact that we could save structural weight, and so we could afford to carry the extra weight of a VTOL system. But that then means that the avionics have to cope with this transition between two flight modes. So it starts off as a multi-rotor, stabilizing itself using the rotor fans, and then it transitions into horizontal flight. So there's a handover there where the control surfaces, the aerodynamic control surfaces start working, and the VTOL stops working, and vice versa on the way back. So there's a lot of energy management required, and that has made the system more complex, but solving those problems has allowed us to make it practical.
I can see, Dario, that those systems are very complex. Bernie, it makes motor vehicles look rather simple. In your case, you recently expanded the company into a new factory. So what's the idea behind that?
So we've basically doubled our manufacturing footprint because we've added another model to our Nissan range. So for those that don't know, we manufacture or do secondary manufacturing on Nissan vehicles to make them more appealing to Australian customers or fit a niche in the Australian new car market. So we have done over 6,000 Navara Warriors over the past 3.5 years, and now we're just about to launch today a Patrol Warrior, which will basically double our manufacturing footprint, and therefore we had to commission a new facility to keep up with that demand, which is a great story, yeah, for us, and you know, really exciting because the implication is, or what we have to do to make that facility run is employ another whole batch of people, and so we've got people who ex-Ford, ex-Toyota, ex-GMH manufacturing employees on our books, and so it's really great to give them a place to go to after that long history of working in Australian car manufacturing back in the day.
I understand, Bernie, you've also made another pivot towards defence. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we did. This was part of the, you know, when we stepped out of the relationship with Ford via the FPV business, we had to diversify not only our capabilities, because, you know, we weren't just working on V8 sports sedans anymore, but we had to look at different potential customers. So we had a big push into China. I lived in China for a little while and did a lot of business development in China, but then also other industries, you know, Dario spoke at length about aviation. We did an aviation project for a Japanese OEM, so I was listening with great interest, Dario. We did to what you were talking about. It was a helicopter program, so we had to learn all about aviation as well. But then critically, we started a relationship with some defence companies as well, and I think one of the things that we were able to do was apply those product development skills and processes and disciplines from the automotive industry. Ross will know all about this, and apply those to other industries. And it's a very appealing mix because, you know, although the technology in aviation, and Dario has just given us a great picture of that, is very complex and it's different to what we see in automotive, but that product development system, which has been refined in a very, very competitive environment that is the automotive car and the automotive industry, global automotive industry, can be applied to other industries. And our customers, such as you know, Thales, who we work on defence projects with, and the Japanese OEM I spoke about before with this helicopter design, were very appreciative of our ability to bring the discipline of the automotive product development system into their particular product and industry. So again, it's all about understanding what your skills are, understanding what you can bring, and then, you know, trying to apply that to different industries. And Ross spoke very, I was very interested in what Ross said about, you know, you've got to tell people about it. Our company's the same. It's just full of engineers and manufacturing people, and then the back office staff, very talented financial people and accountants. But, you know, the marketing side of the business, you can't sit in your office in cotton wool and think that someone's going to knock on your door and you know, ask for your services to be applied to their business. You've got to go out there and sell, and we've had a big focus on that in the last 2 years. Probably people are getting sick of seeing that, know me, getting sick of seeing my LinkedIn posts about spruiking our capabilities and our authority content. But we've got some really talented people helping us with that. Peter Fardiev, who used to be comms director at Nissan and Mercedes and worked at Ford in communication. So he's helped us get our story out there. So that's another thing. You know, if I was going to give any advice to people, and I've got the benefit of hindsight now doing this for 11 years in my own business, you know, tell people what you do. You know, you'll be amazed. You know, I'm hearing about Dario and Ross's capabilities today, and I'm thinking, oh wow, I wonder how we could, you know, maybe do something together. So, you know, it's important. It's important to get out there.
Ross, I'd like to go back to you now. We've seen these dynamic young men in two exciting industries. Is there another generation of Georges out there that is going to take over from yourself?
Yeah, so I've got two out of three are engineers. Yay! And one is working here. So I had 6 years outside the business in all sorts of other different places, and has come in and it's just bringing a completely fresh set of eyes in. Looking at how we do things, and we're changing our business model. We're changing a whole lot of things in response to that younger generation. We're fortunate. We've got a whole cohort of. We're much smaller than Bernie, but the bulk of our engineers now are in that 30 to 40 age group. So they're dynamic, they're enthusiastic, they're open-minded. So yeah, we can see a pathway going forward. As I said, we're working a lot in the environmental space. So these guys that are 30-ish, have got a whole career up to 2050 in the environmental side, in that all that engineering in circular economy and you know, and zero carbon fuels and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited, I have to say, for the next generation. I think the world's their oyster.
So we'll see a new generation of AUSTENG. Dario, just back to you for a minute. So apart from the technology, which you focused on before of many kinds and very interesting, you've also worked on your company structure, and you have a number of different capabilities inside the company. How do you manage those different capabilities?
Yeah, I think culture. It's really important to keep people focus on the mission, have very clear values that you reiterate at every occasion, have them literally written on the wall on people's t-shirts, really get everyone aligned on why are we doing this, what are we trying to do for who, what's important, and really emphasize how it all comes together and how, particularly in a relatively small business, people have ownership. They know that their element of the work can affect everyone else's and can let everyone down or can make the difference. And so curiosity is really at the root of it. And again, listening to Bernie before, the idea, the value of cross-pollination. So when you put together a team to design drone avionics in sort of 2015, you go, well, I can't hire an experienced drone avionics person because there's no such thing. So you look at comparable disciplines. So we had people out of medical devices, a couple of guys actually out of motorsport, and the core of the team that sort of I put together out of America's Cup. And you have all these different skills, and you structure it obviously in different areas of specialization, but you bring them all together. You let them know that, or make it very clear, and everyone is aware that what everyone does affects everyone else. So again, so as an example, aircraft design is really mainly about packaging. It's about fitting the tightest possible skin around all the different bits that you have to carry. And so when you've got a PCB designer that's laying out a board that has to do certain things, they need to be aware that it has to fit within certain dimensional constraints. It has to meet some weight targets. It has to be energy dense, power dense, all of those things. And you find that out by talking to the person next door or next to you who's designing the skin of the airframe. And does it have to be a little bit bigger? Does it have to be a bulge over here? Can we wrap it around more tightly? And it's a constant back and forth. And being hands-on is really important as well. We have a lot of theoretical knowledge, and we find that with interns that come out of university, we have to kind of reprogram them to be hands-on, to actually physically have something in front of you that you can manipulate and see how it interacts with the other physical artifacts in the aircraft. And so, yeah, it's really about recognizing the different areas, but not siloing them. And we have all sorts of deliberate activities, like we have something called KT sessions, which is knowledge transfer, where once every couple of weeks, one engineer will sit in front of the whole team and explain to them their area of expertise. So it might be something really obscure like electrostatic discharge and how to prevent it, or something around CASA regulations, or something around the composites process and how you determine the best cure cycle, but sharing that with the rest of the business. And if everyone else is curious, they're learning about something outside their area, which is interesting just because it's interesting, but it also can then affect the way you think and how you do your job and how you can improve things. So yeah, cross-pollination. And I guess that, going from boats to planes is an obvious example, but there's a lot of other examples in there that you look at what someone else is doing and you go, well, that's an analogous problem. They've solved it in an elegant way. Can I bring that across into my area and make it work?
Thanks, Dario. And I understand you're also working with Quickstep now, the composites manufacturer, to look at scaling your production. So look, with that, we're coming towards the close of our session today. We've heard a lot. We've heard from a small engineering company, AUSTENG, automotive manufacturer Premcar, and drone manufacturer Carbonix. I'd like to bring into the conversation Craig Potter of Fusion5. Craig, you've been listening to our talk today. What are the main things you got out of it? What will you take away?
Yeah, look, these are stories that we are hearing from all of our customers about, this change. I love Bernie's comment about, the constant being change, and that from a systems point of view, that we also have to be able to facilitate those change. The disruption of having to change a system because it doesn't fit the needs of our changing business. When you go out to buy software, you go out saying, this is what I need. Look at all of the stories today. When they first went to buy software, what did they need? But all of a sudden, as their business grew and changed, they had to change because of lots of reasons. Sometimes, in Dario's case, because they were looking to grow. Other times because they just had to change, forced. And that there's having software that they can change with them is where we work with our clients. the things like when you bought your software, did you think about software that would be able to help you with your investment strategies that Ross had, joint venture capability, even having software that will handle those projects where you're re-kitting factories? Those sort of things aren't always on your list of requirements when you go out looking for a new system. And a lot of these small systems just don't tend to be able to grow with your business. And in our day-to-day, we are working with customers and trying to get them to think about a bigger picture that will enable them to change and facilitate it with the systems to support them. Look, I've got to say, I also took a little note on one of the things we're also doing a lot of today is, again, software now being able to integrate it with AI. No one spoke about AI in today's sessions, but it is something that most of our customers are talking to us about, and how AI can help us. So not only is it, the change on down at these lower levels of the guys in their day-to-day operations, but actually how they can go into the future, right? And these changes are happening whether we like them or not, and may make the difference in our ability to be competitive. And again, companies like Fusion5, that's our story, and that's what we're doing every day, and we love it. We love it.
Thanks, Greg. Fusion5's got an ebook available on its website, and there's a link there on your screen. You can click on that now to download it, or just go to the Fusion5 website and look for the New Reinventors ebook. For me, look, the exciting thing is I've been writing about manufacturing for 50 years, business for 50 years, and it's still exciting to see companies like Ross reinventing themselves and with a terrific future ahead. Bernie, Quinn, I love automobiles too, and we all want to see the automobile industry come good, and you're leading the way, so thank you. And Dario, what an inspiration, a leading edge globally drone system, all coming from Australia. Well, there's nothing left for me but to thank our panel, Ross George, Dario Valenza, and Barry Quinn, and of course, Michael Llewellyn and Craig Potter from Fusion5. Thanks to Fusion5 who made this webinar possible. Do reach out to them if you want to discuss a reinvention and see how they can help you. It's goodbye from me, Peter Roberts, and to those watching in the office, many thanks for joining us. With that, I'll close today's meeting. Thank you and good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
See ya.